So, a smart cookie is this informal phrase that just means a person who is smart.
Yeah, if you're intelligent, if you always get the right answer, people might say, hey, you're a smart cookie. Well, let's get back to these chips and why they are full of air, these chip bags. Well, it says chip makers, the people who make them, the companies who make them, call all that air in the bags slack fill. Slack fill. That's what they call it.
That's the industry name, okay?
Slack fill.
They don't say empty space, they say slack fill. Now, to explain this, we should look at the word slack, S-L-A-C-K, slack. Now, if something is slack, it's loose rather than tight. So we could use it to talk about how we hold something, okay? Or we could talk about how tight or not something is. In this case, we're talking about how something is filled. If it's tightly packed, then it would just be full of chips all the way to the top. So this is not tight, it's slack. It is loosely filled.
Okay.
So they're not all pushing against each other. It's got lots of air in there, so that's why it's slack. It's not tight. That's the whole idea. That is why they call it slack fill. It's filled in a slack or kind of loose way, not a tight way.
Okay, the next sentence explains a little bit more about why this is a good idea. It says they claim slack fill, or this extra air, is necessary because chip bags are shoved into boxes and moved around during shipping. They bounce around in the trucks, the boxes get dropped, they get pushed onto the shelves in the supermarket. I see their point, because then you'd end up with just a lot of broken, tiny little chip pieces at the bottom. The air acts sort of as a cushion, as kind of a bubble.
That seems to be it.
Interesting. Yeah, when you shove things, that means you push them with a lot of force, not really being careful about what gets hurt, what gets damaged, what gets knocked over. If you're trying to push your way through a big group of people, you might shove them out of the way or something like that. Of course, that's rude and dangerous. But also, if you're trying to get maybe too many clothes into your bag, you might try to shove things in there so you can get a little bit more. And they were saying that these bags get shoved around as they're being shipped or during shipping.
That's right. Shipping here is the process of packing something up and sending it to a new location. So that's putting things in boxes, wrapping up the boxes, putting the boxes in a pile, wrapping them up, putting them in a big metal shipping container, putting that on a boat or on a truck, and driving it or sailing it somewhere. So
then taking it off,
and then taking it off and taking everything out. So
that
is the shipping process. You'll often see shipping, this word, when you buy something online, and they will talk about the shipping cost. So that is the cost of getting everything from one place to another safely and all wrapped up and so on.
That's right. And we use that term even if things are traveling by airplane or truck. Doesn't have to travel by a ship. So even if it goes on truck from one place, we're still talking about shipping. So what does the air do?
Well, the article says the air prevents the chips from turning into crumbs during the moving process or the shipping. So this phrase turn into is a phrasal verb meaning to change from one thing or one state into another.
And what is a crumb? Well, a crumb is a small broken off piece of some kind of food. Often it's a dry or crunchy food or something like that. For example, if you make some toast, if you sort of cook some bread so it's nice and crisp and crunchy, and then bite into it, not every single piece of that bread will go in your mouth. Some of it will fall onto your lap or the table or the floor. Those would be the crumbs. We can also use it to talk about a very small amount of something, right? I only have a few crumbs of change in my pocket, might be something people would say, but generally it's just a small amount of food that has fallen off and it'll need to be cleaned up. Of course, if you open a bag of chips and it's all crumbs, there's not going to be any big chips in there. You're just going to have to eat tiny pieces. You're eating the crumbs.
That'd be terrible.
I know.
Who would want to
worst.
just eat the little powdery broken
lick your
bits?
finger and lick the crumbs off.
I don't want that.
Gross.
Now this might happen. They might be turned into crumbs during the shipping, this whole process of moving things about. Okay, so the process, this is spelled Process. You can say process or process. Both ways are correct. And it's the series of actions that are done to achieve a purpose. Okay, so start with this, then do this, and then we do this, and so on. So we could say it's important that we follow the correct process during a science experiment. Because if you don't do things in the right order, maybe boom. So do everything the right way and do what the teacher tells you. Follow the correct process.
Oh, so when they're giving instructions and they say step 1, step 2, step 3, that's the process.
That is the process.
Don't jump to the end. Start at the beginning, work your way through. Here's another reason for slack fill. It says, in addition, the air in the bags keeps chips fresh. All right, so that's kind of strange because I've noticed that if you leave some chips out on the table, they won't be fresh after an hour or so.
Let science explain it.
Okay.
That's because the air used isn't oxygen, but nitrogen gas.
Oh, well, that explains it.
It does. So oxygen is spelled Oxygen, oxygen, and it's a gas. It's found in the air and in water, and it's necessary for humans when we want to live. Okay, it's what we breathe in and out. And did you know that trees and other plants make oxygen when they are creating energy for themselves?
That's true.
That's what they do. They produce oxygen.
Right, and they eat up the carbon dioxide as well, so that's good. Well, nitrogen, it's another type of gas. It's actually the most common gas in the air. Oxygen, the stuff that keeps us alive, is only about 12% of our air that we breathe. Nitrogen is very, very common, but we can breathe nitrogen. Small amounts are okay, but it can't keep us alive on its own. But it is a very common gas. It occurs naturally in the Earth's environment. So nitrogen is okay for us, but it's great for keeping chips crisp.
Yeah, we do need a small amount of nitrogen to live. It's important. And as the article says, don't worry though, nitrogen gas isn't harmful to us.
As long as there's some oxygen there.
So nitrogen gas isn't harmful. Harmful is spelled Harmful, harmful, and it's an adjective that means dangerous, something that causes harm or damage. For example, don't handle these harmful chemicals unless you have gloves and glasses on. Very important. So there we go. So it's the nitrogen in the bag is not harmful because, as the article points out, in fact, about 78% of the air we breathe is nitrogen, not oxygen. As you said, it's the biggest part, it's most of what is in, so we do breathe it, it's absolutely fine, and some of it we do use in our bodies. So let's look at the word breathe.
Yes, when we're talking about moving air into our bodies and out of our bodies to keep us alive, what is the action? It's called breathing. We breathe, this verb, to stay alive. Breathe is spelled B-R-E-A-T-H-E. And that's that action of filling your lungs with air and blowing it out and doing it over and over and over again to keep the oxygen in your blood to keep you alive. Of course, we breathe when we're alive, we breathe when we're sleeping, we breathe without thinking about it, and that's great. As long as there's air with oxygen, we're okay. But as the example sentence says, humans can't breathe underwater. Well, we can, but we need to take the air with us.
Oh, yeah.
We aren't fish.
Now, so that's why we have this slack fill, this air in the chip bags. Still, some people claim that chip bags these days have too much air in them.
That's true. Maybe you don't
feel
need
that?
quite so much of an air cushion to keep your chips nice. And yeah, they do seem to be getting a little bit lower. So what should you do? Well, the article says perhaps or maybe it's best to stick with the chip brand that gives you the most for your money. So if you're opening chips from one company, you notice they're very, very low, maybe just don't buy those and stick with a company that gives you a little bit more for your money. When we stick with something, this verb basically means, this phrase I should say, basically means you continue doing things in that way or with that person or with that thing. For example, if you're trying to lose weight, you should stick with your exercise program. If you have a teacher who's teaching you a lot of good stuff and they're really doing a good job, you stick with that teacher because they're working well for you. It's not a relationship that you want to change. You want to stick with it and continue it.
Okay, well that is the end of our first fun fact. We'll have another one tomorrow, but now it's time for our For You Chat question.